Dr. Sophia Mill stepped quietly through the automatic doors of Riverside Community Hospital's emergency department, her worn sneakers making barely a sound on the polished linoleum floor. The digital clock above the nurse's station displayed 11:43 p.m. in soft red numbers, and the familiar hum of medical equipment created a peaceful backdrop to what had been, thankfully, a relatively calm Tuesday night shift in rural Montana. Her colleagues knew her as a competent, methodical emergency physician who had joined their small hospital team 19 months ago. She was the doctor who never seemed flustered, who approached every case with the same careful precision, whether treating a minor cut or a cardiac emergency. What they didn't know was that Dr. Sophia Mill had once been doctor. Sophia Elizabeth Mill Harrison, former director of advanced medical systems for NASA's Artemis Deep Space Program, architect of life-saving protocols that had revolutionized medicine in the most extreme environments humanity had ever attempted to conquer. Tonight, that carefully buried past was about to surface in ways she could never have anticipated. Sophia settled at the computer workstation, her fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard as she updated patient records from her shift. Around her, the emergency department maintained its familiar rhythm. The soft beeping of monitors, the distant murmur of conversations between nurses, the occasional shuffle of footsteps as staff moved between rooms. She found comfort in this predictable environment, so different from the high-stakes world she had left behind. "Another quiet evening, Doctor." "Mill," observed Nancy Peterson, the night charge nurse who had become something of a mentor to Sophia during her time at Riverside. Nancy had worked in this emergency department for 23 years and possessed an intuitive understanding of both medicine and people that Sophia deeply respected. "I've learned to appreciate quiet evenings," Sophia replied with a slight smile, though she didn't elaborate on why the absence of crisis had become so precious to her. The emergency department doors slid open with their characteristic pneumatic whisper, admitting Harold Brennan, a 74-year-old retired railroad worker who had become a frequent patient due to his poorly controlled diabetes and stubborn refusal to follow dietary restrictions. Sophia had treated him 6 times in the past year, always with patience and without judgment, gradually earning his trust and compliance with treatment recommendations. "Dr. Mill," Harold said, approaching her workstation with obvious embarrassment. "I'm afraid I've done it again. My blood sugar's been running high all day, and now I'm feeling pretty poorly." Sophia immediately stood and guided him toward an examination room. "Harold, no need to apologize. Let's get you checked out and see what we can do to help you feel better." As she began her assessment, taking vital signs and reviewing his medication compliance, Sophia noticed subtle changes in Harold's presentation that concerned her. While his blood sugar was indeed elevated, there were additional symptoms that suggested something more complex than his usual diabetic episodes. "Harold, I want to ask you about some other symptoms. Have you been experiencing any chest discomfort or shortness of breath today?" "Well, now that you mention it, I have been feeling a bit winded, but I figured that was just because of the high blood sugar." Sophia's clinical instincts, sharpened by years of diagnosing medical emergencies in environments where missing something critical could mean death, immediately focused on the possibility of cardiac involvement. Harold's symptoms could indicate diabetic ketoacidosis, but they could also suggest an acute cardiac event masked by his diabetic condition. "Nancy," Sophia called, "could you please get an EKG on Harold and run a complete metabolic panel, including cardiac enzymes?" Nancy appeared in the doorway, slightly surprised by the extensive workup for what appeared to be Harold's routine diabetic management. "The full cardiac workup, Doctor. Mill." "Something feels different about his presentation tonight," Sophia explained quietly. "I want to make sure we're not missing anything." Over the next 45 minutes, Sophia's suspicions proved correct. While Harold's blood sugar was significantly elevated, the cardiac enzymes revealed that he was also experiencing a silent myocardial infarction, a heart attack that presented with atypical symptoms, particularly dangerous in diabetic patients who often don't experience classic chest pain. Nancy, I need you to contact the cardiac team at Billings immediately, Sophia said, already preparing medications to stabilize Harold's condition. Harold is having both diabetic ketoacidosis and an acute MI. We need to get him to a facility that can handle both conditions simultaneously. Dr. Mill? Nancy said with obvious admiration. Most physicians would have treated the diabetes and sent him home. How did you know to look for cardiac involvement? Sophia focused on preparing the medication infusions that would stabilize Harold for transport. Sometimes the most dangerous conditions hide behind the obvious ones. The key is always looking at the complete picture. What she didn't say was that her training in space medicine, where physicians had to consider multiple potential failure modes simultaneously with limited diagnostic resources, had taught her to think in terms of complex, multi-system problems rather than simple, single diagnosis cases. As the helicopter arrived to transport Harold to the larger hospital, Dr. Michael Harrison, the emergency department medical director, approached Sophia with obvious respect. Excellent catch, Mill. Harold would have gone into full cardiac arrest at home if you hadn't identified the MI. That's the kind of diagnostic thinking that saves lives. Sophia simply nodded, uncomfortable with praise that highlighted her abilities. In her previous life, such multi-system analysis had been routine, expected. Here, it seemed exceptional, which made her feel like she was living under false pretenses every day. As her shift concluded and dawn approached, Sophia completed her documentation with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized all her work. She gathered her belongings from the small locker assigned to emergency department physicians and prepared to walk home to her modest apartment above the town's independent bookstore. Her life in Riverside was deliberately simple. She shopped at the local grocery store, attended community events when her schedule permitted, and had developed genuine friendships with several of her colleagues. What none of them knew was that she had once been responsible for medical protocols that protected astronauts on the International Space Station, that she had developed surgical techniques for zero-gravity environments, or that her research had contributed to planning for humanity's eventual missions to Mars. That life felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. 3 weeks later, Sophia was working the afternoon shift when her carefully constructed quiet existence began to show its first cracks. She was examining a construction worker who had suffered a deep laceration to his forearm when the hospital's overhead paging system crackled to life with an announcement that would change everything. Emergency department, this is regional dispatch. We have an incoming military helicopter with multiple trauma patients. ETA 12 minutes. Prepare for severe injuries. Possible surgical intervention required. The transformation in the emergency department was immediate and impressive. Nancy began coordinating with the surgical team, respiratory therapists checked ventilator availability, and lab technicians prepared for emergency blood work. Sophia felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied critical cases, though she maintained the calm, systematic approach her colleagues had come to expect from her. Dr. Mill, you take Trauma Bay 1, Dr. Harrison directed. We've got limited information, but it sounds like we're dealing with serious flight-related injuries. As Sophia prepared her equipment, checking each instrument and medication with systematic precision, she experienced an odd sense of foreboding. Something about this situation felt significant in a way she couldn't quite articulate. The sound of rotor blades grew steadily louder until the military helicopter became visible through the emergency department windows. Sophia could see immediately that this was not a standard medical transport aircraft. It was a sophisticated military machine, the kind used for special operations or high-priority missions. Paramedics rushed the first patient through the doors on a stretcher, followed immediately by two more. Sophia found herself assigned to a young woman in specialized flight gear, unconscious, and showing signs of significant head trauma, multiple fractures, and internal injuries. "What's the situation?" Sophia asked the flight medic, a composed military professional who was maintaining pressure on what appeared to be arterial bleeding. Captain Jennifer Torres, 29 years old, test pilot. Aircraft experienced complete hydraulic failure during evaluation of experimental flight systems. She managed to maintain control long enough to reach safe airspace, but the emergency landing was severe. Unconscious at scene for approximately 15 minutes, intermittently responsive during transport. Suspected traumatic brain injury, confirmed fractures of left femur and multiple ribs, possible internal bleeding. Sophia's hands moved with practiced efficiency, conducting primary and secondary assessments while her mind processed the information. Something about the patient's gear caught her attention. The flight suit bore patches and insignia that looked familiar, though she couldn't immediately place them. Blood pressure 90/60 and dropping, heart rate 110, respirations 22 and shallow, reported Nancy, who was assisting with the assessment. Pupils are reactive but sluggish. Glasgow Coma Scale is 12 inches. As Sophia continued her examination, Captain Torres's eyes fluttered open. Despite her injuries and obvious disorientation, she focused on Sophia's face with surprising intensity. "Doctor," Captain Torres said weakly, her voice barely audible above the equipment alarms. "You look familiar. Have we met somewhere before?" Sophia felt a chill of recognition mixed with apprehension. "I don't think so, Captain Torres. I'm Dr. Million. You're at Riverside Community Hospital. You've been in an aircraft accident, but we're going to take excellent care of you." Captain Torres studied Sophia's face more intently, and despite her head injury, something sharp and analytical remained in her eyes. "Dr. Mill? Sophia Mill? Wait, are you Dr. Sophia Mill from NASA? From the Artemis Medical Program?" The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. Around her, the trauma team continued their work, but she felt as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. Nancy looked up from the IV she was establishing, clearly confused by the exchange, but also curious. "Captain Torres, I think you might be experiencing some confusion from your head injury," Sophia said carefully, her voice remaining steady despite her racing heart. "Let's focus on your immediate medical needs." But Captain Torres wasn't deterred by Sophia's deflection. "You developed the emergency surgical protocols for zero-gravity environments. I studied your research during my astronaut candidate training 2 years ago. You were the youngest director in NASA's history." Sophia's colleagues had paused in their work, clearly intrigued by this unexpected revelation. Dr. Harrison approached the trauma bay, his expression mixing curiosity with concern. "Dr. Mill, is there something you need to tell us?" he asked, though his tone remained supportive rather than accusatory. Before Sophia could formulate a response, urgent voices from the adjacent trauma bay interrupted the moment. "Dr. Mill, we need you in trauma 2 immediately," called Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the other attending physician on duty. "This patient is deteriorating rapidly." Sophia looked between Captain Torres, who was stable despite her injuries, and the crisis developing in the next bay. Her decision was immediate and instinctive. Patient care took precedence over personal discomfort. "Continue the assessment and prepare for CT scan," she instructed Nancy. "I'll be right back." In Trauma Bay 2, Sophia found controlled chaos surrounding Major David Kim, the helicopter's pilot. The 34-year-old officer was experiencing what appeared to be a tension pneumothorax, a life-threatening condition where air trapped in the chest cavity was compressing his heart and lungs. Dr. Martinez was preparing to insert a chest tube, But Major Kim's condition was deteriorating faster than standard protocols could address. Blood pressure is 70/40 and continuing to drop, reported the assisting nurse. Heart rate 140 and climbing. Sophia quickly assessed the situation, and her training immediately identified complications beyond the standard tension pneumothorax. Major Kim had sustained multiple rib fractures that had damaged major blood vessels in his chest wall, creating a complex emergency that required advanced surgical intervention beyond what a small rural hospital typically encountered. "Dr. Martinez," Sophia said quietly, "may I suggest a modified approach?" Dr. Martinez looked up, perspiration visible on his forehead as he struggled with the deteriorating situation. "I'm definitely open to suggestions, Doctor. Million. This isn't responding to our usual protocols." What happened next would be described by witnesses as extraordinary medical artistry. Sophia stepped forward and began implementing a series of procedures that none of her colleagues had ever seen before. Using precise movements and techniques that seemed to come from advanced surgical training far beyond typical emergency medicine, she addressed not only the pneumothorax, but also the complex vascular injuries that were threatening Major Kim's life. "Nancy, I need a pediatric vascular clamp from the surgical suite and prepare for emergency thoracotomy," Sophia said, her voice calm but commanding. "Also, get me the smallest available chest tube. We're going to need precision placement." "Pediatric clamps for an adult patient?" Nancy asked, confused but already moving to fulfill the request. "The smaller instruments will give me better control in the confined space between his ribs," Sophia explained, already making a precise incision with movements that spoke of extensive surgical experience. What followed was a masterclass in advanced trauma surgery, performed in an emergency department that rarely saw anything more complex than heart attacks and farming accidents. Sophia worked with the precision and confidence of someone who had performed similar procedures in the most challenging environments imaginable, using techniques that seemed to anticipate complications before they occurred. "How did you know to approach the vascular repair that way?" Dr. Martinez asked, as Major Kim's vital signs finally stabilized. "Sometimes the most effective solutions come from thinking beyond conventional limitations," Sophia replied, carefully avoiding a direct answer. As she completed the procedure and ensured Major Kim was stable for transport to surgery, Sophia became aware that more than just her medical colleagues were observing her work. Two men in military uniforms had entered the trauma bay and were watching with obvious professional interest. "Dr. Mill," one of them said, approaching as she removed her surgical gloves. "I'm Colonel Richards from the Military Medical Command. That was an impressive display of surgical skill." Sophia felt the carefully constructed walls of her new life beginning to crack. "I was simply doing my job, Colonel." "With respect, Doctor, what you just accomplished goes significantly beyond standard emergency medicine. Major Kim had injuries consistent with high-velocity aviation accidents or space-related incidents. The surgical techniques you employed, where exactly did you acquire that level of expertise?" Before Sophia could deflect the question, Captain Torres called out from the adjacent trauma bay, where she was now sitting up and much more alert despite her injuries. "Colonel Richards, Dr. Mill, used to be doctor. Sophia Mill Harrison at NASA. She was Director of Advanced Medical Systems for the Artemis program. I've studied her research extensively. She's one of the pioneers of extreme environment medicine." The trauma bay fell silent except for the steady rhythm of monitoring equipment. Sophia's colleagues stared at her with expressions mixing surprise, respect, and newfound understanding. The military personnel exchanged meaningful glances that suggested this revelation had significant implications. Colonel Richards stepped closer to Sophia, his expression serious. "Dr. Mill, if you are who Captain Torres suggests, We have a developing situation that may require your specific expertise. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, clearly struggling to process this unexpected revelation about his colleague. Dr. Mill, is what Captain Torres saying accurate? Were you really a director at NASA? Sophia looked around the trauma bay at the faces of people she had worked alongside for 19 months, people who had accepted her as a competent but unremarkable emergency physician. The secret she had guarded so carefully was disintegrating in real time, and there seemed to be no way to stop the process. Yes, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I was director of advanced medical systems for NASA's Artemis Deep Space program for 8 years. Deep space? Nancy repeated, her eyes wide with amazement. Like actual space exploration? Among other responsibilities, Sophia replied, still uncomfortable with the attention. I developed medical protocols for long-duration space missions, designed surgical systems for zero-gravity environments, and researched methods for providing advanced medical care in the most isolated conditions humans have ever experienced. Colonel Richards pulled out a secure tablet and showed Sophia an official-looking document with multiple classification markings. Dr. Mill, we have a critical situation developing that requires immediate consultation from someone with your background and security clearance. Are you still cleared for classified briefings? My clearance should still be active, Sophia admitted reluctantly, though I haven't accessed classified information in nearly 2 years. What kind of situation? Dr. Harrison interjected, his protective instincts regarding his staff evident in his tone. And why does it involve our emergency department? Colonel Richards glanced around the trauma bay, clearly uncomfortable discussing classified matters in front of civilian medical staff. Major Kim and Captain Torres weren't participating in a routine training exercise. They were testing experimental medical equipment designed for the lunar base medical facility when their aircraft experienced catastrophic system failures. We need someone who understands both the technology involved and the kind of improvised medical procedures that might be necessary when conventional systems fail. Sophia felt a familiar surge of intellectual curiosity, the same drive that had made her one of NASA's youngest program directors. But she also felt the weight of the peaceful life she had built in Riverside, the sense of purpose she had found in treating individual patients without the pressure of national security implications. Colonel, I appreciate your confidence in my abilities, but I'm no longer with NASA. I've found my place here at Riverside, and I'm committed to this community. Dr. Mill, Captain Torres said from her stretcher, may I speak with you privately for a moment? Sophia approached her patient, grateful for a brief respite from the intense scrutiny of the room. Doctor, I realize this isn't my place to say, Captain Torres said quietly, but I've read your published research. Your work on emergency medical procedures in extreme environments has already saved lives during space missions. If there's really a problem with the medical systems for the lunar base, people are going to die without your expertise. Captain, there are other qualified professionals available. Are there really? Your paper on performing complex surgery in reduced gravity environments is considered foundational reading for space medicine. You didn't just theorize about these procedures, you actually developed and tested them. The number of people with that combination of theoretical knowledge and practical experience is extremely limited. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of responsibility that seemed to be settling on her shoulders once again. Her departure from NASA hadn't been about dissatisfaction with the work, which she had genuinely loved. It had been about personal circumstances that had made continuing in that environment impossible. But those circumstances had changed, and the intellectual challenge of space medicine still called to her. Colonel Richards approached again, his expression respectful but urgent. Dr. Mill, I understand that you left NASA for personal reasons. I'm not asking you to return permanently to the space program, but we have astronauts scheduled to deploy to the lunar base in 5 weeks, and Major Kim was supposed to be their primary medical officer. We need someone who can assess the equipment failures that nearly killed him today, determine what modifications are necessary, and possibly serve as interim medical advisor until we can fully resolve these issues. What exactly happened to the medical equipment? Sophia asked, her scientific curiosity beginning to overcome her reservations. The details are classified, Colonel Richards replied. But if you're willing to consult on this situation, we can provide a complete briefing. Dr. Harrison stepped closer to Sophia, his expression mixing concern with understanding. Dr. Mill, if this is something you feel you need to do, the hospital will support you completely. We can arrange coverage for your shifts and ensure your position here remains secure. Dr. Harrison, I haven't agreed to anything, Sophia replied, though she could feel her resolve beginning to weaken. Perhaps not, he said with a knowing smile. But I've worked with you for 19 months. I've never seen you back down from a medical challenge, especially when lives are at stake. This sounds like exactly the kind of problem you were born to solve. Captain Torres added from her stretcher. Doctor Mill, during my astronaut training, they emphasized that success in space often depends on having the right expertise available when critical situations arise. Right now, we need your expertise. Sophia looked around the trauma bay one more time, taking in the faces of her colleagues and the military personnel waiting for her decision. In the back of her mind, she could hear the voice that had driven her through years of groundbreaking research. The desire to solve medical problems that no one else could solve, to push the boundaries of what was possible in the most challenging environments. Colonel Richards, she said finally, I'll need a complete briefing on the equipment failures and full access to all medical data from today's incident. And I want a clear understanding that this is temporary consultation, not a permanent return to the space program. Absolutely, Doctor. Million. We can arrange secure transportation to the facility this afternoon if you're ready. Nancy stepped forward, her expression mixing pride with concern. Dr. Mill, will you be coming back to Riverside? Sophia smiled at the nurse who had become not just a colleague, but a genuine friend. Nancy, this is my home now. I'll be back. But first, I need to help solve a problem that could save lives in one of the most dangerous environments humans have ever attempted to work in. As the trauma team began preparing both patients for transport to larger hospitals for specialized care, Sophia felt a complex mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She had built a new life in Riverside, finding peace in the straightforward challenges of rural emergency medicine. But the intellectual challenge of space medicine, the opportunity to use her unique expertise to potentially save lives in humanity's most extreme frontier, was proving impossible to ignore. The military transport arrived at Riverside Community Hospital 4 hours later, a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and government license plates that looked distinctly out of place in the hospital's modest parking lot. Sophia had spent the intervening time completing her patient documentation, arranging coverage for her scheduled shifts over the next week, and making personal arrangements for her absence. She had also called her landlord, Mrs. Henderson, to explain that she would be away on medical consultation work, though she couldn't provide specifics about the nature of the assignment. Mrs. Henderson, a retired teacher who had become something of a surrogate grandmother to Sophia, simply wished her well and reminded her that her apartment would be waiting when she returned. As Sophia prepared to leave, Dr. Harrison approached her for a private conversation in his office. Dr. Mill, or should I say Dr. Mill Harrison, I want you to know that learning about your NASA background doesn't change anything about how we view you here. You've been an exceptional physician and a valued member of our team. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. That means more to me than you know. But I also want to say that it explains a great deal. The way you approach complex cases, your systematic attention to detail, the fact that you seem to identify patterns and connections that the rest of us miss. You've been applying space medicine expertise to rural emergency medicine. Sophia smiled, feeling a sense of relief at finally being honest about her background. I suppose I have been. The fundamental principles are remarkably similar. Work with limited resources, expect multiple system failures simultaneously, and always have contingency plans for your contingency plans. Will you consider staying permanently when this consultation is finished? This is temporary, Sophia replied firmly. Riverside has become my home in a way that nowhere else ever was. I found something here that I lost when I left NASA, a sense of personal connection to the work and the community. I don't want to give that up. The journey to Edwards Air Force Base took 5 hours, during which Colonel Richards provided Sophia with an initial briefing on the situation that had led to Major Kim's near-fatal accident. The details were more complex and disturbing than she had anticipated. The Lunar Base Medical Facility is designed to operate completely autonomously, Colonel Richards explained as they traveled through the California desert. It has to be, given the communication delays and the complete impossibility of medical evacuation to Earth. Major Kim was conducting final testing of the surgical suite when multiple critical systems failed simultaneously. What kind of failures? Sophia asked, her mind already working through the implications of such a scenario. Life support integration with surgical systems, anesthesia delivery mechanisms, and most critically, the automated surgical assistance protocols that you helped develop 4 years ago. Sophia felt a chill of recognition. The ASAP system was designed with triple redundancy. For multiple components to fail simultaneously suggests either a fundamental design flaw that we missed during development or deliberate sabotage. That's precisely our concern. We need someone who understands the system architecture from the ground up to determine what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening to the astronauts currently stationed on the lunar base. When they arrived at Edwards, Sophia was struck by how familiar the environment felt, despite her absence of nearly 2 years. The controlled urgency, the precise communication protocols, the sense that every decision carried significant consequences. It was the world she had inhabited for 8 years of her life. Colonel Richards escorted her to a secure briefing room where she was reunited with several colleagues from her NASA days. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, her former research partner and closest friend at NASA, greeted her with obvious relief mixed with concern. Sophia, thank God you're here. This situation is beyond anything we anticipated when we designed the lunar medical systems. How serious is it, Rebecca? Serious enough that we've suspended all lunar missions until we can resolve it. The failure cascade that nearly killed Major Kim today could happen to any of the 6 astronauts currently on the lunar base if they need to use the surgical suite. We need to understand why your safety protocols didn't prevent this catastrophic failure. Over the next 6 hours, Sophia immersed herself in technical data, system logs, and failure analysis reports. Her colleagues watched as she applied the same methodical, systematic approach that had made her legendary at NASA, examining every detail and looking for patterns that others had missed. Here, she said finally, pointing to a specific section of code in the system software displayed on the large screen. This is the root of the problem. Someone has modified the integration protocols between the life support and surgical systems. The modification is extremely subtle, but it creates a vulnerability that could cause exactly the kind of cascade failure that nearly killed Major Kim. Modified by whom? Colonel Richards asked, leaning forward intently. That's not my area of expertise, Sophia replied. But I can tell you that whoever did this had intimate, detailed knowledge of the system architecture. This wasn't random sabotage or simple hacking. It was targeted, sophisticated, and designed to cause maximum damage while remaining undetected during routine testing. Dr. Walsh studied the code analysis more closely. Sophia, if you're correct about this, then every lunar mission we've launched could be at risk. The medical systems on the current lunar base are identical to the ones Major Kim was testing. How many people are currently stationed on the lunar base? Sophia asked, though she dreaded the answer. 6, Colonel Richards replied grimly. And they're scheduled to remain there for another 4 months, with 2 more crew rotations planned before the system upgrade mission. Sophia felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. 6 people, hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth, depending on medical systems that could fail catastrophically at any moment. It was exactly the kind of life or death problem that had originally drawn her to space medicine, but the stakes felt even higher now. Colonel, I need immediate access to the communication array. I want to speak directly with the base medical officer and get a real-time assessment of their current system status. Dr. Mill, communication with the lunar base involves extensive security protocols and scheduling constraints due to orbital mechanics. Then we need to start those protocols immediately, Sophia replied firmly. Because if those systems fail while the crew is on the base, there's absolutely nothing anyone on Earth can do to help them. The communication session with Lunar Base Alpha was scheduled for the following morning at 0630 hours, accounting for orbital positioning and the complex relay systems required for reliable contact across the vast distance of space. Sophia spent the night reviewing every technical detail of the medical systems, looking for additional vulnerabilities and developing preliminary contingency protocols. She found herself in a strange state of mind, simultaneously energized by the intellectual challenge and deeply concerned about the lives at stake. This was the kind of problem she had trained for, planned for, but hoped would never actually occur. At 0600 hours, she was in the Mission Control Center, surrounded by engineers, physicians, and military personnel, all focused on the large displays showing real-time telemetry from the lunar base. The room buzzed with quiet conversation and the constant background hum of sophisticated electronics. Lunar Base Alpha, this is Mission Control Houston. We have Dr. Sophia Mill standing by for emergency medical consultation, announced the communications officer. Mission Control, this is Dr. Alex Rivera, Chief Medical Officer, Lunar Base Alpha. Dr. Mill, it's an honor to speak with you. I've studied your research extensively during my space medicine training. Sophia leaned toward the microphone, her voice carrying clearly across the impossible distance. Dr. Rivera, thank you. I need you to walk me through the current status of your medical systems, particularly focusing on the surgical suite integration protocols. Over the next 90 minutes, Dr. Rivera provided a comprehensive assessment of the base's medical capabilities. As Sophia had suspected, the same vulnerabilities that had nearly killed Major Kim were present in the lunar systems, but they hadn't been triggered yet because the base crew hadn't encountered situations requiring the more advanced surgical procedures. Dr. Rivera, I'm going to guide you through a specific diagnostic sequence, Sophia said, providing detailed step-by-step instructions for testing the system integration without triggering a potential failure cascade. The results confirmed her worst fears. The medical systems on Lunar Base Alpha were vulnerable to the same catastrophic failures, and given the sophisticated nature of the sabotage she had identified, failure was not just possible, but virtually inevitable if complex medical procedures were attempted. Mission Control. Dr. Rivera's voice crackled through the speakers with obvious concern. The diagnostic results matched Dr. Mill's predictions exactly. We have significant vulnerabilities in our surgical systems that could result in life-threatening failures. Colonel Richards stepped forward to the communication console. Dr. Mill, what are our options? Sophia studied the data displays, her mind racing through possibilities and their potential consequences. We have 4 primary options, she said finally. First, we can attempt to modify the software remotely, but that carries significant risk of making the situation worse or completely disabling their medical systems. Second, we can wait for the next scheduled supply mission and send corrected systems, but that's 9 weeks away. Third, we can attempt an emergency evacuation of the lunar base, but that would essentially end the current mission and set back the lunar program by years. Fourth, we can guide the base medical team through manual procedures that completely bypass the automated systems. What do you recommend? A combination of the first and fourth approaches, Sophia replied after a moment of consideration. We implement carefully designed software patches to prevent the most dangerous failure modes. We develop comprehensive manual backup procedures, and we accelerate the supply mission timeline if at all possible. Dr. Walsh approached the communication console with obvious concern. Sophia, implementing remote software changes is incredibly risky. If we make a mistake, we could completely disable their medical capabilities. Which is why I'm going to design and test the changes myself, Sophia replied. Rebecca, this is exactly what we trained for during all those years. Complex problems, life or death consequences, no room for error, and the need to work with incomplete information under extreme pressure. Over the next 4 days, Sophia worked with an intensity and focus that impressed even her former NASA colleagues who remembered her legendary dedication to problem solving. She designed software modifications, created detailed manual backup procedures, and developed comprehensive training protocols for the lunar base medical team. Her approach was methodical and thorough. She would design a modification, test it extensively in simulation, review it with the engineering team, test it again, and only then propose it for implementation. Her colleagues marveled at her ability to envision complex medical procedures in the alien environment of the lunar base, accounting for reduced gravity, limited resources, and the psychological stress of being hundreds of thousands of miles from any possible help. Dr. Mill, Dr. Rivera's voice came through the communications array on day 4. We've successfully implemented your software modifications. All system diagnostics show that the critical vulnerabilities have been addressed. That's excellent news, Dr. Rivera. But I want you to continue using the manual backup procedures for any surgical interventions until we can send updated hardware on the next supply mission. Understood completely. Dr. Mill, on behalf of the entire lunar base crew, I want to express our gratitude. Your work over the past few days may very well have saved our lives. As the immediate crisis was resolved, Sophia found herself facing a different kind of pressure. NASA leadership had made it clear that they wanted her to return permanently, not just as a consultant, but as Director of Deep Space Medical Operations, a newly created position that would oversee medical systems for all current and future lunar missions, as well as the planned Mars exploration program. Sophia, Dr. Walsh said as they walked through the corridors of the Space Center, you belong here. The work you've accomplished over the past 4 days reminded everyone why you were the youngest program director in NASA history. I have a life in Montana, Rebecca. A good life with meaning and purpose. But you're doing emergency medicine in a small rural hospital when you could be developing medical systems that will support human expansion throughout the solar system. Doesn't that seem like a waste of your talents? Sophia paused in their walk and looked out through a window at the launch pads in the distance, where rockets stood ready to carry humans and supplies to the space station and beyond. After I left NASA, I spent months feeling completely lost. I had defined myself entirely through my work, and when that work became impossible to continue, I didn't know who I was anymore. Working in Riverside helped me remember that I'm not just a scientist or a doctor. I'm a person who wants to help other people, whether that's Mrs. Henderson having a heart attack in a small-town emergency room or Dr. Rivera performing surgery on a lunar base. Then why not do both? Dr. Walsh suggested. The new position would allow you to spend part of your time in the field, part of your time doing research, and part of your time training the next generation of space medicine specialists. You could maintain your connection to clinical practice while advancing human space exploration. Before Sophia could respond, Colonel Richards approached with a serious expression and a classified document folder. Dr. Mill, we've identified the source of the software modifications that caused the system vulnerabilities. Who was responsible? Dr. Marcus Webb, formerly of our medical systems engineering team. He was terminated 8 months ago for security violations and financial irregularities. It appears he was recruited by a competing space program to sabotage our medical systems. Sophia felt a surge of anger. He nearly killed 6 people for money? The investigation is ongoing, but yes, that appears to be the case. Your analysis was crucial not only in identifying the technical problems, but also in providing evidence of the deliberate sabotage that we can use in the criminal prosecution. As Sophia processed this information, she realized that her decision to help with the crisis had implications far beyond just solving a technical problem. Her expertise had been essential in protecting human lives and uncovering serious criminal activity that threatened the safety of all space missions. Colonel, what's the status of Dr. Webb now? He's been arrested and is facing federal charges for sabotage, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The competing space program that hired him is also under investigation. Dr. Walsh placed a supportive hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia, do you realize what this means? Your decision to help, even temporarily, didn't just save the lives of the current lunar base crew. It exposed a security threat that could have affected every future space mission. That evening, Sophia found herself alone in the observation deck of the Space Center, looking up at the stars and reflecting on the unexpected path that had brought her back to this place. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Nancy at Riverside Hospital. Dr. Mill, Harold Brennan came in today asking about you. His cardiologist says the heart attack you caught probably added 10 years to his life. We miss you here, but we're proud of the important work you're doing. Come home when you're ready. Sophia smiled, feeling the pull of both worlds, the intellectual challenge and global impact of space medicine, and the personal connections and immediate human impact of rural emergency medicine. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see Dr. Harrison's number. Dr. Mill, how are things progressing out there? Hello, Dr. Harrison. We've successfully resolved the immediate crisis. The astronauts on the lunar base are safe. We could affiliate with NASA, bring space medicine expertise to rural healthcare, and give space medicine researchers exposure to the kind of improvised, resource-limited medical practice that could be crucial for long-duration space missions. You could split your time between both programs. Dr. Harrison, that's a remarkable idea. It gets even better. We've already had preliminary discussions with NASA about potential funding. They're extremely interested, especially after your work this week demonstrated how valuable real-world clinical experience can be for space medicine applications. As Sophia considered this unexpected possibility, she realized that her perceived choice between 2 different worlds might actually be a false dilemma. The skills and perspective she had gained through rural emergency medicine had directly contributed to her success in solving the lunar base crisis. And the advanced techniques and systematic thinking she had learned in space medicine had undoubtedly saved lives like Harold's and improved her care of countless other patients in Riverside. Dr. Harrison, I would very much like to hear more details about this program. Excellent. Take whatever time you need to finish your NASA consultation, and we'll discuss the specifics when you return. But Sophia, I want you to know that whatever you ultimately decide, you'll always have a place at Riverside. After ending the call, Sophia remained on the observation deck, looking up at the moon and thinking about the 6 people living and working there, depending on medical systems that she had helped to design and repair. Tomorrow, she would meet with NASA leadership to discuss their offer of permanent return. But tonight, she felt a sense of peace about the future that she hadn't experienced since leaving NASA nearly 2 years ago. Her quiet life in Montana had given her perspective and renewed her connection to the human side of medicine. Her return to space medicine had reminded her of the intellectual challenges and global impact that had originally drawn her to the field. Perhaps the answer wasn't choosing between these paths, but finding a way to integrate them in a meaningful way. That's what I heard through some unofficial channels. Impressive work, according to my sources. Thank you. Sophia, I have a proposition for you. What if there were a way for you to do both jobs? Keep your connection to Riverside and also contribute to space medicine? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I've been discussing with some colleagues the possibility of establishing a rural medicine research program focused specifically on extreme environment medicine. The basic idea is that the challenges of providing medical care in isolated rural areas have significant similarities to space medicine: limited resources, no immediate backup, complex decision-making under pressure, and the need for creative problem solving. Sophia felt a spark of genuine interest. That's actually a fascinating connection that I hadn't fully considered. We could affiliate with NASA, bring space medicine expertise to rural healthcare, and give space medicine researchers exposure to the kind of improvised, resource-limited medical practice that could be crucial for long-duration space missions. You could split your time between both programs. Dr. Harrison, that's a remarkable idea. It gets even better. We've already had preliminary discussions with NASA about potential funding. They're extremely interested, especially after your work this week demonstrated how valuable real-world clinical experience can be for space medicine applications. After ending the call, Sophia remained on the observation deck, looking up at the moon and thinking about the 6 people living and working there, depending on medical systems that she had helped to design and repair. Tomorrow, she would meet with NASA leadership to discuss their offer of permanent return. But tonight, she felt a sense of peace about the future that she hadn't experienced since leaving NASA nearly 2 years ago. Her quiet life in Montana had given her perspective and renewed her connection to the human side of medicine. Her return to space medicine had reminded her of the intellectual challenges and global impact that had originally drawn her to the field. Perhaps the answer wasn't choosing between these paths, but finding a way to integrate them in a meaningful way. As Sophia considered this unexpected possibility, she realized that her perceived choice between 2 different worlds might actually be a false dilemma. The skills and perspective she had gained through rural emergency medicine had directly contributed to her success in solving the lunar base crisis. And the advanced techniques and systematic thinking she had learned in space medicine had undoubtedly saved lives like Harold's and improved her care of countless other patients in Riverside. Dr. Harrison, I would very much like to hear more details about this program. Excellent. Take whatever time you need to finish your NASA consultation, and we'll discuss the specifics when you return. But Sophia, I want you to know that whatever you ultimately decide, you'll always have a place at Riverside. After ending the call, Sophia remained on the observation deck, looking up at the moon and thinking about the 6 people living and working there, depending on medical systems that she had helped to design and repair. Tomorrow, she would meet with NASA leadership to discuss their offer of permanent return. But tonight, she felt a sense of peace about the future that she hadn't experienced since leaving NASA nearly 2 years ago. Her quiet life in Montana had given her perspective and renewed her connection to the human side of medicine. Her return to space medicine had reminded her of the intellectual challenges and global impact that had originally drawn her to the field. Perhaps the answer wasn't choosing between these paths, but finding a way to integrate them in a meaningful way.
3 weeks later, Sophia stood in the emergency department of Riverside Community Hospital, back in her familiar scrubs with her stethoscope around her neck, treating a rancher who had been injured when his horse threw him during a cattle drive. The work felt both completely natural and somehow enhanced by her recent experiences. She found herself applying problem-solving approaches from space medicine to routine emergency cases, while her renewed appreciation for hands-on patient care informed her thinking about future space missions. "Dr. Mill," Nancy said, approaching with a patient chart and a warm smile. "It's wonderful to have you back. The department really hasn't been the same without you." "It's good to be back, Nancy, though I suspect I'll be traveling somewhat more frequently in the coming months." Dr. Harrison had been true to his word about the Rural Space Medicine Partnership Program. The concept had received enthusiastic support from both NASA leadership and the rural medicine community. Sophia would spend part of her time at Riverside, part at NASA facilities, and part traveling to other rural hospitals to implement the integrated training program. "Dr. Mill," called out a familiar voice from the emergency department entrance. Captain Torres, now fully recovered from her injuries and walking without assistance, entered wearing civilian clothes and a broad smile. "Captain Torres, it's wonderful to see you looking so well." "Please, call me Jennifer. I'm actually here on official business. I've been assigned as the NASA liaison for the new Rural Space Medicine program. It looks like we'll be working together quite a bit." Sophia smiled, feeling pieces of her life fitting together in ways she hadn't anticipated. "Jennifer, that's fantastic news." "Fantastic. It gets even better. Major Kim has also requested assignment to the program once he completes his recovery and rehabilitation. He's very interested in the application of extreme environment medicine to pilot safety and training protocols." As they talked, Sophia's pager buzzed with an incoming trauma alert. She excused herself and moved toward the ambulance bay, where paramedics were unloading a patient who had been injured in a serious farming accident involving heavy machinery. As she worked to stabilize the patient, she found herself seamlessly applying techniques and approaches from both her rural emergency medicine experience and her space medicine background. The integration felt natural and effective. She used systematic assessment protocols developed for space missions, while drawing on her deep understanding of rural trauma patterns and resource limitations. 8 months later, the Riverside Community Hospital conference room was filled with an extraordinary gathering that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. Rural emergency physicians sat alongside NASA engineers and astronauts. Medical students from universities across the country listened intently to presentations covering everything from treating cardiac emergencies with limited resources to performing complex surgery in reduced gravity environments. Sophia stood at the front of the room, presenting her latest research on cross-training applications between rural and space medicine. The integrated program had exceeded everyone's most optimistic expectations, leading to innovations that significantly benefited both fields. "The fundamental insight," Sophia explained to the diverse audience, "is that isolation creates remarkably similar challenges regardless of whether you're 50 miles from the nearest trauma center or 50 million miles from Earth. Limited resources, communication delays, the need for creative problem solving, and the requirement for physicians to work outside their normal specialty areas are constants in both environments." Dr. Harrison watched from the back of the room with obvious pride and satisfaction. The program he had proposed had grown into a nationally recognized initiative, with Riverside serving as the primary training site for what was now formally called Extreme Environment Medicine. After her presentation, Sophia was approached by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a young physician who had just completed her emergency medicine residency and was considering specializing in space medicine through the new integrated program. "Dr. Mill, I've been following your work since the lunar base crisis made headlines. I'm very interested in applying for the fellowship program, but I'm curious about something personal. Do you ever regret leaving NASA the first time?" Sophia considered the question carefully, recognizing its importance for the young physician's career planning. "Dr. Vasquez, I left NASA because I needed to rediscover who I was as a person, not just as a scientist and physician. The work here in Riverside taught me that the most sophisticated medical technology in the world is meaningless without the human connection and empathy that drives us to heal. When I returned to space medicine, I brought that perspective with me, and it made me a better physician, researcher, and teacher. So you don't see the time in rural medicine as time lost from advancing space exploration? Absolutely not. Every patient I treated here, every small-town medical emergency I handled, every conversation with community members contributed to my understanding of medicine under pressure and with limited resources. That experience directly contributed to saving lives on the lunar base and continues to inform the research and training we're doing now. Dr. Vasquez smiled with obvious relief. Thank you. That gives me confidence that there are multiple valid paths to making a meaningful contribution to both space exploration and medicine. As the conference concluded, Sophia found herself standing outside the hospital with Jennifer Rodriguez and Major Kim, who had indeed joined the program after his complete recovery. Sophia, Jennifer said, I have some news that you might find very interesting. The success of the Rural Space Medicine program has attracted the attention of the Mars Mission Planning Committee. They want to know if you'd be willing to serve as Chief Medical Officer for the first crewed Mars mission. Sophia felt the familiar surge of excitement that came with unprecedented challenges and opportunities. When is this mission scheduled to launch? 4 years from now, Major Kim replied. But the medical system development, crew training, and mission planning would begin immediately. It would represent the ultimate application of everything we've learned through this integrated program.
And, Jennifer added with enthusiasm, the mission architecture includes a comprehensive telemedicine component that would allow the Mars crew to provide medical consultation to remote Earth locations during the long journey. It would literally connect space medicine and rural medicine in real time across interplanetary distances. Sophia looked back at the hospital where she had found herself and discovered her true calling, then up at the evening sky where Mars was visible as a small red dot in the twilight. 4 years ago, she would have seen such an opportunity as requiring a choice between different worlds and different aspects of her identity. Now, she understood it as the natural evolution of an integrated approach to medicine that honored both technological advancement and human connection. I'm very interested, she said thoughtfully. But I want to maintain my connection to Riverside and continue the rural medicine work throughout the preparation phase. This place and these people have become part of who I am. Of course, Jennifer replied. In fact, the mission planners specifically want to use Riverside as a primary training site. The concept is that Mars crew members should be completely comfortable providing medical care in resource-limited, high-pressure environments. There's no better training ground than a rural emergency department. Major Kim nodded in enthusiastic agreement. Besides, you've proven conclusively that the combination of high-tech space medicine and hands-on rural practice creates better physicians and more innovative medical solutions. The Mars mission will absolutely need that integrated expertise. 2 years into the Mars mission preparation, Sophia found herself in a professional position she could never have imagined. She was simultaneously Chief Medical Officer for humanity's first crewed Mars mission, Director of the Rural Space Medicine Institute at Riverside, and still a practicing emergency physician who took regular shifts in the small-town hospital that had become her true home. The integration of these roles had produced remarkable results that benefited both space exploration and rural healthcare. Rural hospitals across the country were now equipped with simplified versions of space medicine technologies, allowing them to provide more sophisticated care in isolated environments. Meanwhile, astronaut training now included mandatory rotations in rural emergency departments, giving space crews practical experience in improvised medicine and resource-limited problem-solving. Dr. Mill, called out Nancy, who had been promoted to Director of Nursing for the new institute. You have some visitors who specifically requested to see you. Sophia looked up from the patient chart she was reviewing to see Harold Brennan walking slowly but steadily into the emergency department, accompanied by a woman she didn't immediately recognize. Harold, how wonderful to see you. How have you been feeling? Dr. Mill, I'm doing remarkably well. The cardiologists tell me that my heart function has improved significantly since you caught my heart attack 2.5 years ago. He gestured to his companion with obvious pride. This is my daughter, Doctor. Rebecca Brennan. She's just finishing her residency in emergency medicine, and she wanted to meet the doctor who saved her father's life. Dr. Rebecca Brennan stepped forward with evident emotion. Dr. Mill, when my father told me how you diagnosed his heart attack when other physicians might have simply treated his diabetes, I knew I wanted to specialize in emergency medicine. I've been following your work with the Mars mission preparation and the Rural Space Medicine program. Would there be any possibility of joining the institute? Sophia smiled, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from seeing the ripple effects of good medical care extending across generations. Dr. Brennan, we're always looking for exceptional physicians who understand that excellent medicine requires both technical expertise and genuine human connection. I'd be very happy to discuss the program with you. As they talked, Sophia's secure communication device buzzed with an incoming message from the Mars mission training facility. The latest group of astronaut candidates had completed their rural medicine rotation at Riverside and were requesting extended training time beyond the standard program requirements. Nancy, Sophia said, it looks like we'll need to expand the astronaut training program yet again. We're getting more requests for extended rotations than we can currently accommodate. That's definitely a good problem to have, Nancy replied with a knowing smile. Who would have thought that little Riverside, Montana would become an essential destination for space travelers? Later that evening, Sophia stood in her office, which now overlooked both the familiar emergency department and a new wing of the hospital, dedicated to extreme environment medicine research and training. On her desk were several items that represented the different aspects of her integrated career. A worn stethoscope that had been with her through countless patient encounters in rural Montana, a model of the Mars medical habitat that she was helping to design, and a photograph of the current lunar base crew, all of whom had trained at Riverside. Her secure phone rang, and she was surprised to see Dr. Rivera's identification. Communications with the lunar base were typically scheduled events, so a direct call was unusual and potentially concerning. Dr. Rivera, is everything all right at the base? Dr. Mill, everything is excellent. Actually, better than excellent. I wanted to give you a comprehensive update on our medical capabilities here. The improvements you implemented 2 years ago have worked flawlessly. We've successfully performed several complex surgical procedures using the manual backup protocols you developed, and the new automated systems from the recent supply mission are functioning perfectly. That's wonderful news, Dr. Rivera. But that's not the primary reason I'm calling. I wanted to let you know that 4 members of our current crew have expressed strong interest in the Mars mission. Your integrated approach to space medicine has proven so valuable here that we want to be part of the next step in human space exploration. Sophia felt a profound sense of satisfaction and continuity. The work that had begun with a crisis and her reluctant return to space medicine had evolved into a sustainable, growing program that was advancing both rural healthcare and human space exploration. Dr. Rivera, I would be honored to have experienced lunar-based personnel join the Mars mission team. Dr. Mill, there's something else important I wanted to share. The lunar-based medical system has been so successful that NASA has asked us to serve as the primary model for the Mars Habitat Medical Facility design. Your integration of automated systems with comprehensive manual backup procedures has become the standard for all future extreme environment medical facilities. After ending the call, Sophia reflected on the unexpected and remarkable path her career had taken. She had left NASA seeking peace and anonymity, found purpose and community in rural medicine, and ultimately discovered that her greatest contribution came from refusing to choose between different aspects of her calling. 3 years later, Sophia stood in the same emergency department where she had treated Harold's misdiagnosed heart attack, but now she was wearing a different kind of uniform. The Mars mission crew suits were designed for both practical function and historical symbolism, representing humanity's next great leap into the solar system. Dr. Mill, Nancy said, approaching with obvious emotion despite her professional composure. It still doesn't seem real that you're actually leaving for Mars next month. It doesn't feel entirely real to me either, Sophia admitted. But Nancy, you know this isn't goodbye forever. The mission duration is 22 months, and when I return, Riverside will still be my primary base of operations. Dr. Harrison joined them, carrying a carefully wrapped package. Sophia, the entire hospital staff wanted to give you something special to take with you on the mission. He handed her the package, which contained a framed photograph of the Riverside Emergency Department team, a small piece of Montana granite, and a handwritten letter signed by every member of the hospital staff. So you'll always have a piece of home with you, no matter how far you travel, he explained. Sophia felt tears forming in her eyes as she read portions of the letter. Doctor, Harrison, Nancy, all of you. This means more to me than any scientific award or professional recognition. The emergency department had been transformed for her departure ceremony. Rural physicians who had participated in the space medicine program stood alongside NASA personnel and astronauts. Local ranchers and farmers whose lives had been touched by the medical advances developed through the program shared space with international space medicine experts who had come to study the rural space integration model. Harold Brennan, now a vigorous advocate for comprehensive cardiac screening, approached with his daughter, Dr. Rebecca Brennan, who had completed the Rural Space Medicine Fellowship and was now serving as Sophia's successor as director of the institute. Dr. Mill, Harold said, you saved my life, but more importantly, you showed all of us that extraordinary things can happen in the most ordinary places when people care enough to look beyond the surface. Dr. Rebecca Brennan added, the Institute is in excellent hands with the team you've built. We'll continue developing and expanding the integrated approach to extreme environment medicine, and we'll be here when you return from Mars with new knowledge to apply. Jennifer Rodriguez, now a colonel and associate director of NASA's Human Spaceflight Medicine Program, stepped forward with the final mission briefing materials. Sophia, final systems check confirms that all medical equipment for the Mars transport and surface habitat is functioning perfectly. The backup manual procedures you developed are programmed and ready for any situation. And the interplanetary telemedicine array that will allow you to consult on Earth cases during the journey is online and fully tested. So even on the way to Mars, I'll still be practicing rural medicine, Sophia said with a smile. That was always central to the mission plan. The integration of rural and space medicine isn't just a training philosophy anymore. It's how we're going to practice medicine throughout the solar system. As the ceremony concluded, Sophia found herself alone for a moment with Dr. Vasquez, who had completed the fellowship program and was now part of the mission planning team for future Mars expeditions and the proposed Europa Medical Research Station. Dr. Mill, when you return from Mars, what comes next? Sophia looked around the emergency department that had become so much more than a small-town hospital. Dr. Vasquez, when I return, we'll use everything we learn on Mars to further improve medical care, both in space and in isolated Earth communities. The goal was never just to reach Mars, but to use the challenges of space exploration to advance medicine everywhere humans might need care. And personally? What's next for you personally? Sophia smiled, thinking of the long journey ahead and the life waiting for her when she returned. Personally, I've learned that home isn't a place you have to choose between different career opportunities. Home is where you can be completely yourself while serving others to the best of your abilities. Mars will be my temporary workplace, but Riverside will always be my home. As Sophia prepared to leave for the final pre-launch preparations at Kennedy Space Center, she took one last look around the emergency department. In 22 months, she would return with experience from humanity's greatest adventure, ready to apply that knowledge to continued service in both space and rural medicine. The quiet emergency physician, who had once hidden her extraordinary background, had become a bridge between worlds, proving that the most remarkable journeys often begin with a simple decision to help others, regardless of where that service might ultimately lead. 6 weeks later, Dr. Sophia Mill stood on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, looking up at the massive rocket that would carry her and 5 other crew members to Mars. The Artemis 7 spacecraft represented the culmination of decades of technological development and international cooperation. But for Sophia, it also represented the integration of everything she had learned about medicine in extreme environments. "Dr. Mill," said Commander Elena Rodriguez, Jennifer's older sister and mission commander, "final medical systems check. Everything ready?" "All medical systems are green," Sophia confirmed, checking her tablet one final time. "Primary surgical suite, backup manual procedures, telemedicine array, and pharmaceutical inventory all confirmed, ready for the journey." As the crew made their final preparations, Sophia received a priority message on her personal communication device. It was from Nancy at Riverside Hospital. "Dr. Mill, Harold came in for his routine cardiac checkup yesterday. His cardiologist says he's in the best health he's been in for 20 years. Mrs. Henderson sends her love and says she's proud to know someone who's going to Mars. We'll be watching the launch and thinking of you. Come home safe." The launch itself was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the massive rocket lifted off and Earth fell away beneath them, Sophia felt a profound sense of responsibility. She was carrying with her not just the hopes of the space program, but the practical knowledge and human-centered approach to medicine that she had learned in rural Montana. 3 months into the journey to Mars, the integration of rural and space medicine proved its value in an unexpected way. Dr. Kim Santos, the mission geologist, developed symptoms that initially appeared to be a simple gastric upset, but quickly became more serious. "Sophia," Commander Rodriguez said, "Kim is experiencing severe abdominal pain, and his vital signs are concerning. We need your assessment." Using the systematic approach she had learned from treating complex cases with limited resources, Sophia quickly determined that Dr. Santos was experiencing acute appendicitis, a potentially life-threatening condition that required immediate surgical intervention. "Commander, I need to perform an emergency appendectomy," Sophia announced. "We can't wait until we reach Mars." The surgery, performed in the spacecraft's small medical bay using both automated systems and manual backup procedures, was successful. But perhaps more importantly, Sophia was able to use the interplanetary telemedicine system to consult with Dr. Harrison at Riverside Hospital during the procedure. "Sophia," Dr. Harrison's voice came through the communication system with a slight delay due to the vast distance. "That approach to the peritoneal access is exactly what we discussed during your rural surgery rotation. You're applying small hospital techniques in the most extreme environment possible." The landing on Mars was successful, and the crew quickly established their base of operations in the pre-positioned habitat modules. Sophia found herself responsible not only for crew medical care, but also for testing and refining medical procedures that would be used by future Mars colonists. 6 months into their surface mission, a dust storm damaged several critical systems, leaving the crew with limited resources and no possibility of immediate resupply from Earth. It was exactly the kind of situation that Sophia's rural medicine experience had prepared her for. "We need to repair the water reclamation system," announced engineer Maria Petrov, "but the replacement parts won't arrive on the next supply mission for 8 months." Using improvised materials and techniques adapted from rural emergency medicine, Sophia helped the crew develop temporary solutions that kept all systems functioning until proper repairs could be made. But perhaps the most significant moment came when the crew received an emergency communication from Earth. A major earthquake had struck a remote region of Montana, overwhelming the local medical facilities. Using the interplanetary telemedicine system, Sophia was able to provide critical consultation for multiple trauma cases, guiding local physicians through complex procedures while she was literally millions of miles away. "Dr. Mill," came the voice of Dr. Rebecca Brennan from Riverside Hospital. "We have a patient with multiple crush injuries from the earthquake. The nearest trauma center is 6 hours away by helicopter due to weather conditions." "Dr. Brennan," Sophia replied, "let me walk you through a procedure we can do with the resources you have available. It's based on techniques I learned during my space medicine training, but we've successfully used similar approaches for farming accidents in rural areas." Epilogue. Return. 22 months later, Dr. Sophia Mill walked back into the Riverside Community Hospital Emergency Department, her Mars mission patch prominently displayed on her jacket alongside her hospital identification badge. The department looked exactly as she had left it, but she carried with her knowledge and experience that would benefit both space exploration and rural medicine for generations to come. "Dr. Mill," Nancy called out with joy, "welcome home. We have some patients who have been specifically asking when you'd be back." Sophia laughed, feeling the deep satisfaction of returning to meaningful work in a place where she truly belonged. "Nancy, it's wonderful to be home. What do we have today?" "A rancher with a complex fracture, a child with respiratory distress, Harold's grandson who wants to meet the doctor who saved his grandfather and went to Mars, and believe it or not, a NASA engineer who specifically requested to be treated here because she heard about our space medicine program." Sophia picked up her stethoscope, the same one she had carried to Mars and back, and prepared to begin her next shift. The integration of rural and space medicine continued to evolve. The Institute thrived under Dr. Rebecca Brennan's leadership, and the next Mars mission was already incorporating lessons learned from her experiences. But today, she was simply Doctor. Sophia Mill, emergency physician at Riverside Community Hospital, ready to provide excellent medical care to anyone who needed it. She carried within her the knowledge that extraordinary service often begins with ordinary compassion, and that the boundaries between rural medicine and space exploration were far less important than the shared commitment to healing and helping others. The quiet life she had once sought had evolved into something far more meaningful, a life of purpose that embraced both the grandest challenges of human exploration and the intimate responsibility of caring for individual patients, one at a time, with skill, compassion, and the understanding that every person deserves the best medical care possible, whether they're in a small Montana town, on a lunar base, or preparing for humanity's next great journey to the stars. Harold Brennan, now 81 but still vigorous, was waiting in the emergency department lobby with a huge smile and a small American flag. "Dr. Mill," he said, "I wanted to be the first patient you see back on Earth. Not because I'm sick, I'm doing great thanks to you, but because I wanted to welcome home the doctor who saved my life and then went to Mars to help save other lives." Sophia hugged the elderly man who had been one of her first patients in Riverside. "Harold, it's patients like you who made me the physician I became. Everything I learned here made me better at taking care of people everywhere, even on Mars." As she looked around the emergency department that had become her true home, Sophia realized that her journey had come full circle. She had left NASA seeking herself, found purpose in rural medicine, returned to space exploration with new wisdom, and come home to continue the work that mattered most, caring for people wherever they needed help, using every skill and every lesson learned along the way. The integration was complete, and the future held infinite possibilities for service, exploration, and the continued advancement of medicine in service of humanity, whether on Earth, in space, or wherever the human spirit might venture next. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.